I hate the word frum. It's a word that's used when people ask how religious or observant someone is in Judaism, and they'll say, are you frum? Is she frum? Is he frum? Especially when they haven't met the person before and you're trying to characterize the person. And I know sometimes it may be helpful in understanding how much of Jewish ritual they keep, but the problem is it's this very broad general category that I find to be so unhelpful and even judgmental some of the time. There's a story of quite a prominent rabbi who was involved in Jewish outreach, and he went to meet the late Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson, and the rabbi told the Rebbe that he was involved in Kiruv Rechokim, which means bringing close those who are far away, in other words, far away from God, from Judaism. And the Rebbe responded by saying, who are we to say who is far or close to God? And I think that really gets to the crux of how I feel about this word frum and is this person religious or not when we talk in such terms. There's a rabbi I know of who told me that one of his synagogue congregants hosts every Friday night a meal, and she will always make sure to look out for the person who is divorced or on their own, or maybe a little bit socially awkward, whoever it may be, the outcast, and make sure that they have a seat at her Shabbat Friday night table. Having said that, she's not as observant in many areas of Jewish ritual, including some level of keeping Shabbat and kashrut. But he asked me, is she frum? Is this woman religious? By sort of very narrow objective standards, if she's not keeping Shabbat, not keeping kosher to the letter of the law, then she's not. But she's doing something that I'm sure plenty of people who are frum might not do. And by the way, the laws that concern how we act towards our fellow human being are just as if not even more important in Torah and Judaism than the laws are between man and God. And I know that using terms like this may sometimes be necessary to understand, just from a very objective, one-dimensional perspective, how much of Jewish ritual a person keeps. But it does bother me that half of Jewish law and Jewish practice being how we treat our fellow human being isn't even considered when we talk and discuss and use the word frum or religious, when that's half of how someone behaves. So, and even on a spiritual level, even on a religious level, there are people who may pray more, who may think more about God, about their own meaning and purpose, than people who pray 3 times a day. I believe that, of course, Judaism and Torah wants us to aspire to observe as many of the mitzvot and commandment, both between us and God, the rituals, and between man and man, because they're both important relationships. But I also believe, as the Rebbe was trying to point out in this conversation, that every single human being has their own mission, has their own tafkid, and sometimes that means that it just might be keeping just a few or a specific kind of mitzvah or character trait to grow on. And it really isn't our job to judge or determine just how, religious someone is, or how much they are connected to God or to their purpose that God needs of them. Again, it's not our job just to say, oh, well, my job must be this, and therefore I don't have to keep all these other laws. No. But the point is, it's never our job to judge. And I would also add that there are going to be people as well who are frum, according to the one-dimensional use of the term, but when it comes to their personal, moral, private lives, especially how they treat other individuals and how they act in that way, could be gossipers, they could be swindlers, they could be all kinds of things. And so I just find it so narrow to be so one-dimensional when you talk about and use the word frum. I think if we talk about we can ask, is someone Shomrei Shabbat? Is someone Shomrei Kashrut? Do they keep Shabbat, kosher, etc., etc.? Those are better, they're specific terms. But I don't know why, I just get very bothered by the use of the word religious or frum, even though I think some of the time we know what people are talking about. But I think it's too, it implies piety. That's what the word frum means. And I think sometimes it's too narrow when there are people who might objectively observe less, but in God's eyes are more pious, and vice versa. The Talmud tells us that there was a rabbi who once got a peek of the next world, and he described it as a topsy-turvy world. People who thought would be on top weren't as connected. People who he thought had very mundane and relatively insignificant lives were deeply fulfilled and connected and had achieved their mission. So the point of this video, if nothing else, was just to ask that perhaps we check ourselves when using these terms. And even if we don't stop using these terms, and sometimes they are just necessary or easy, just to remind ourselves that these are very throwaway lines, they're one-dimensional, they're narrow, and that it's so critical to understand that God wants and needs every one of us, and it is never our place to judge because, well, the Talmud says, until you're in someone else's shoes, but the point is we'll never be in someone else's shoes, so we can never judge. I'm Ollie Annisfeld, and you're watching JTV.